future. I say you are the future. How are you? And the future is good. Thank you. Thank you. It is really nice to be with you. Before I get started into all of the exciting chemistry that I now get to share with you, let me, some of you are excited. Let me just say, let me say a couple of things. It's been a wonderful morning, don't you agree? I never like to say horrible things, but I'm a little upset at Emily. I was supposed to be able to launch the beauty mist, and I'm really disappointed. As I was putting my makeup on this morning, I thought to myself, I can't wait to launch this, and she took all of that away from me, so I'll just adjust on the fly. You know, I hope that this morning you have a similar sense that I do. And that is, dōTERRA has become bigger than all of us. It is so moving to me to hear and to recognize all of the impact that we're having around the world. As Kiko was up here, and as you will meet other people, as we were coming to convention, my wife reminded me of last year as we were coming to this very facility. I saw all of you coming here, which we saw again this morning, and I asked her, it was a sincere question. She didn't think I was being sincere, but I was. I said, why would they all come? Why would they want to be here? What would be the purpose of that? I hope that today you have gotten a good sense of why you're here. As big as dōTERRA is, as small as we may seem right now in this moment by comparison to what we will be in the near future and beyond, we are nothing without you. You are the impetus that has taken us to where we are today. And so on behalf of myself and all of my partners, we thank you. And give yourselves a big round of applause for your commitment, your dedication, for everything that you're doing to help us in this wonderful work that is dōTERRA. Now, Emily was kind enough. Emily and I kind of have this jostling match every single year when it comes to convention. Emily will carefully look at all of the oils that we have that are coming. I do the same thing. And then it never fails. I'm thinking to myself, well, this would be a good one for me to talk about. This would be a great one to talk about. I think I'll go ahead and talk about this one. I have a lot of relevant information. And then I sit down and I meet with Emily, and Emily says, yeah, that sounds really good to me. I'll just do these other ones. And then have you noticed that Emily always speaks first? That's why she's so agreeable, because she comes out and talks about everything that I was going to talk about. So let's continue, though, in our discussion about Yarrow. Now, I'm going to give you just a little bit more detail on Yarrow, and to me, this is really important. Emily made this parallel with Yarrow and with blue tansy, and she talked about it in a broader scope and perspective as well. There is some similarities between them, and I want to make a good point. Now, last year when we launched blue tansy for you, we really positioned this as a topical essential oil. We felt like it would be best to be used topically, and we see that a lot with essential oils. It's not necessarily that they can't be used in other ways. That's not always the case. As much as it is, they are better suited for some circumstances and for some situations. And in this case, when we look at blue tansy and we look at Yarrow, you see some similarities that exist between them. There's some duplicative chemistry that exists. When we look and we see chemistry and we see that it's duplicated, here's a key point and principle for you to keep in mind. Just because we see similar chemistry doesn't necessarily mean it's going to behave or do all of the exact things. There is some balance that exists there. And in order to demonstrate that and show you more fully, let's look at the differences between yarrow and with blue tansy. Now what you see is that the chemistry actually is still similar. They both have very similar things associated with them. On this slide, I would point out to you, and just as a point of learning for you, that there are primary and secondary benefits associated with each and every essential oil that you'll ever use, that you'll ever be exposed to. In this case, if we look at the beta-caryophyllene, if we look at the germacrine D, and if we look at the chemazoline or the chemazoline, if we look at those, we see that they're all the same chemicals, but they are present in different amounts, in varying amounts. This is important from a key concept. And the key concept is that there is primary and secondary. By that I mean that there is dominant chemistry that's involved in one versus the other. So although the chemistry is the same, when we have so much more, substantially more of each one of those compounds, substantially more of the beta-caryophyllene, substantially more of the germacrine D, and substantially more also of the chemazoline, it has more profound and synergistic benefits. Now, one of the things that's really interesting for me, dominance can be just the sheer amount of chemistry that's there, but dominance can also be how those chemicals or how those compounds effectively work together. And so when we look at something like germacrine D, how many of you are familiar with germacrine D? You did your homework, you read all about it? No? See, this is why convention at some point becomes unfair. I don't have anybody I can call out on stage and say, oh, here to explain to you now is all the finer details of human physiology and chemistry. I don't have that. I don't get to tell these heartwarming stories about chemistry, do I? You know, the other day I was on a walk with my wife and we were holding hands, and it was so impressive, all the beta-pinene that were floating about in the environment. It just doesn't work when I come out and do this. And so I have a more complex job in that I have to help you understand the real value that we see with the essential oils. Now, Emily touched on some of this, and she told you some of the properties that we see when we use these oils topically. And in this case now specifically, I'm talking about the yarrow. When we combine beta-caryophyllene, when we look at that all by itself, we already know its value, and Emily did a wonderful job of pointing that out to you from what we learned about that last year. And we have a substantial amount of that present in this oil. But chemical synergy occurs when we have beta-caryophyllene and we have germacrine D that all work together in symmetry. This is why we see the healing properties. That, along with all of the other chemistry that was noted by Emily. Now, if we look at it in a little more in depth, let me give you a little more insight into why I got excited about this essential oil. We always go through the same process in doTERRA. We start talking about oils. Right now, realistically, we could tell you what we're going to be doing for next year. We plan way ahead. And Emily gave you a good example of why that's important. Some of these are years in the making. Yarrow is not something that we just thought about randomly. We've been working towards that for a long period of time. I got excited about this oil because of the effects that it can create in a metabolic sequence within the body, how it supports the body in its natural processes that way. And so what you're looking at here is a cascade of events that occurs that eventually leads, I'm going to be very compliant today, although I don't want to. Mark, you know, everyone else is over at the Salt Palace right now doing the opening that you already saw, and they left me here. Huh. That might have been a mistake, don't you think? I think I can say anything I want to right now. I'm going to say it. Are you ready? I'm sure they're going to meet me off stage as soon as I leave. This is the inflammation pathway. There it is. I said it. what happens is we have arachidonic acid. Now, just understand this principle. I don't need you to get lost in the details of this cascade of events. That arachidonic acid is this polyunsaturated amino acid that acts as a substrate that stimulates a COX-2 enzyme cascade that leads to prostaglandins, and that eventually what it can do is it can be very disruptive to tissues. I don't need you to know that. What I need you to know, and why I got excited about this oil, is because it demonstrates everything that we know and believe about essential oils. And that is one of the reasons why we are so protective of everything we do with the essential oils. Why quality really matters is because of processes like this. Now, I'm really excited. Later on today and tomorrow, we've got a whole day full of healthcare and initiatives that we're involved in and science. And one of the things that you're going to learn, I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser. Now, I will tell you, we had some company names on all of these slides because I just couldn't help myself. I said, you know what? I've grown tired of all of the challenges. So let's just show it once and for all. That having been said, I felt a little guilty late last night, and we made some adjustments, but I'm sure you all will know who we're talking about as we go through those slides, and many others as well. Essential oils have to be in the form that we provide them, or they simply will not create the benefits that you and I expect. The reality of it is, and you're going to have this opportunity this afternoon to learn pathway. We've made that discovery now in dōTERRA, where we know exactly what's happening with the essential oils, biochemically, biologically, how they're impacting the body. And one of the things that we see with oils, when they're in the quality that we talk about in dōTERRA, is how they interact within the systems as I've outlined for you here. Now, we always think about this pathway, and we always think that it's bad. We never think that it has any value associated with it. This pathway has both acute conditions and chronic conditions associated with it. For example, in an acute circumstance with this, acute circumstances might be the result of I have some type of an injury, or I have some type of a non-chronic illness or process or some other way that's made me temporarily unhealthy. This is a really healthy process for your body to go to. Emily talked a little bit about Yarrow, and she talked about the antioxidant capacity. It is especially important for helping to protect some of the more sensitive issues or tissues within the body, like the brain, like the central nervous system. It also is really good for helping tissues to become more normalized. So, for example, if we have heavy, strenuous activity and we've stressed the muscular tissues of our body, it helps them to redevelop. It helps them to become stronger. It helps them to become more resilient. These are all important characteristics that we see on the acute side. But there's a chronic side to this pathway, and that's what we all get concerned about. And this is one of the reasons I got excited about this essential oil. And it's not just the chemazoline, even though I'm highlighting that here. It's how all of this chemistry works together. But one of the things that we clearly know about chemazoline and other constituents within an essential oil is that they have the ability to interact with that pathway and any others that they come in contact with in a healthy, normalizing way. It means that we can have the body react in a better framework. It means that we can take the chronic nature of some of the struggles that we're having. And how many of you are having struggles with your health? If you're not raising your hand, you're not doing anything. We are all have challenges from time to time. I want you to know, several years ago, I gave a lecture where after a lecture someone challenged me and said, "You're a liar. I know you don't use the essential oils. I know you never would if you were ill or if you were having troubles. I want you to know that is not true. Every single one of us in dōTERRA, all of us as owners, use the oils. We care about them because we use them. We talk about them because we use them. We share them just like you because we use them. Don't lose sight of that we are the same as what you are, and oils is what we choose to do. Now let me talk with you about, this is not just Yarrow essential oil. It's Yarrow Pom, and that means that there's two different things. Now, on the bottle it says this is a nutritive duo. I wouldn't call it a nutritive duo because Yarrow, as an essential oil, as these wonderful volatile aromatic compounds, does not have nutritive density to it. It's not nutritional. But palm seed oil actually is. Pomegranate seed oil, it is. So I would prefer to call it a nutritive complex. And in calling it a nutritive complex, this is the key point and what's so important about that. We took non-volatiles, in the case of palm seed oil, pomegranate seed oil, and we combined it with the volatiles that we see in an essential oil. What's unique about that, and Emily talked about this new delivery system, here's what's unique about that. It allows us to have similar benefits between the two of them, but they work through completely different pathways. In combination, those two things together create for you what I'm going to call metabolic support. Now, when you think about the metabolism within the body, it's all encompassing. It traverses a lot of different frameworks within the body. It deals with the organs and the tissues specifically that are involved in proper metabolism. So you think about organs like the liver or like the pancreas. It also is involved in the actual processes themselves, in creating greater efficiency and better outcomes. I like this opportunity, and if you're listening carefully, what I'm really telling you is you can expect more things like this. Would that excite you? In dōTERRA, we have never been content to just maintain the status quo or do what everyone else is doing. We have always been a company of firsts. And this is the first in an introduction to many things we will do this way that personally I'm really excited about. I wish that you could see in the background of dōTERRA. I really do. I wish that you could see the teams, the countless number of people who are working and who are helping us to accomplish these wonderful tasks. You get to see that in an outward sense, outside of dōTERRA. You get to see all that we're doing in these communities and all of the sourcing and all of the interactions that we have. But do you recognize, do you know that within dōTERRA, there are more than 2,000 employees who are working tirelessly to bring all of this to fruition for us? Can we tell them thank you? We're grateful for them, and we're grateful for their efforts. Now let's talk a little bit about pomegranate seed oil. Now pomegranate seed oil is really comprised of fatty acids. Now you're probably familiar with fatty acids. You know that they're commonly referred to as the building blocks of the body. Your body utilizes them in a variety of different metabolic pathways. And that's partly why this becomes the nutritive complex. Now, one of the things that's interesting about pomegranate is when we look at pomegranate, it just like essential oils, we can receive that and source that in many different ways. One of the most common things to do is what's known as a CO2 extraction. Now, I'm going to save my discussion on CO2 extraction for a little bit later as I talk about another essential oil. CO2 extraction is not necessarily a bad thing, but in this case, we don't see the chemistry that we're looking for. We don't see this complex to the extent that we need within these fatty acids. And the two fatty acids that we're primarily looking for, one is called punicic acid, and the other is called conjugated linoleic acid, CLA. Hey, could you do that again? That is, let's try this one more time. And the other one is CLA. Yeah. It's true. It's true. I'm going to take my wife and we're going to walk through the garden groves of conjugated linoleic acid, and it's going to be fantastic. You should come join us. It'll be wonderful. Now, here's what's unique about this. Now, CLA There's a lot of information on CLA. Depending on what literature you read, some people even refer to it as an omega-5 fatty acid. You know about omega-3s, you know about omega-6s, you know about omega-9s. This is an omega-5, and it just deals with the structure of what that fatty acid is, where the double bonds are located. That's why it's called an omega-5. You get plenty of CLA in your diet. You normally get that from eating meats, and you get that from eating high-fat dairy products. Now that having been said, this is unique because of the purity that we see, and it's unique also because it comes from a fruit. Now, one of the things that's interesting when we start looking at things like this is we look at it and we wonder about the value and the benefits that it will bring, and it's really clear to describe this with this together, this Yarrow Pom together. Now, I want to talk about this in the context of why do I say that they have synergy? Why do I say that when we take beta-carotene, we take punicic acid, and we take the linoleic acid, the CLA, we take those three together, why do they create the dynamic effect that they do? Well, in dōTERRA, we've been in this matter of discovery for a little while now. And part of what we've been looking at is how chemistry and how compounds interact one with another. And one of the things that we've begun doing, which is not a new technology, it's a technology that's used quite often, but it's never been employed with essential oils before, and that's docking of the chemistry. Now, if you don't know what docking is a molecular modeling technique where we can look at the individual molecules, we can look at the individual compounds or components, in this case of an essential oil, and we can see where they interact with the body. And when we take these individuality of what we see in the docking studies of each one of these essential oils, and we combine those together, we get a really good framework of our expectation for how the oil will perform. Now, later on this afternoon, we're going to take you into the next step of that progression and show you what we've discovered really about pathway and essential oils. So let's look at the specific targets associated with this. Now, this may or may not mean very much to you when we talk about the perioxome proliferator activated receptor gamma, the PTAR. That may not mean a whole lot to you. You know what CB2 receptors are within the cannabinoid system, and you also maybe don't have a lot of familiar with the HMGCR receptor. Maybe you don't have a lot of familiarity with those, but you are familiar with the outcome and the benefits. Here's why I believe this is important to our conversation today. Not because I want you to remember those. I don't need you to remember perioxome proliferator activator receptor, gamma. I don't need you to remember that. What I need you to remember is that dōTERRA's essential oils behave differently than others. When we have a change or a difference in the chemistry, we have decrease of the value that's associated with that chemistry. And so we can look at these very specific with the PPAR gamma, and we know that punicic acid and CLA have interaction within those. Or we can look at the CB or the HMGCR, and we know that that is really specifically beta-carotene. We know the extent of the interaction, and we know where they are interacting within those. Remember what I said a little bit earlier, that why I like the pomegranate oil and the Yarrow mixed together is because we have synergy of activity, but we have clearly different pathways. This is an example of the differences that we see in pathways. So for example, beta-carotene is really good for CB2 activation. One of the primary benefits we see from that is its ability to help the tissues from being broken down or being disrupted by way of the pathway that we mentioned a little bit earlier. When we look at the HMGCR pathway, that's really specific in particular about helping the body to maintain normal cholesterol responses. I'm trying so hard to be compliant right now. It is becoming more and more difficult. You know, this is a challenge. The more we discover about essential oils, the more I just want to say, they make your wildest dreams come true. It is hard to be limiting to the value of essential oils. And so, although sometimes in the framework that we have to discuss them, we find that to be challenging, can I have you make a commitment to me and to everyone here today, including yourself? Not become limited in your willingness to share them. To share the excitement and the enthusiasm that you have for them. If I were to ask a question, and plan this, I'm just going to ask anyway. How many of you know somebody that has an illness? You yourself, or you know somebody that has a serious illness. Will you hold your hands up? I mean, we can name those: arthritis, diabetes. Our attorneys are getting really nervous right now. Cancer. How many of you know people like this? We all do. Every single one of us in this room. Now, my point is not that, and so essential oils will solve all that. I'm not saying that. But I have never met the person whom essential oils could not benefit. We just have to be willing to share them. Now, the reason why I always go into so much detail with the essential oils is frankly not because I enjoy it. It isn't. It takes a lot of work to be able to break these down and to put them into consumable pieces and make it understandable the way that it needs to be. That, however, you're welcome. Would you like to go on a CLA walk with my wife and I a little bit later? I'm sure we'll figure that out. I don't even have my train of thought anymore, but I'm sure, I am positive it was a really important thing I was about to say. I really don't know what it was, so we'll just move on. I have no idea. Tunisic acid. Now, CLA, this is why, hey, don't judge me. I'm dealing with complicated chemistry. It's hard to stay on track. So now let's talk about the PPAR gamma. This is really clear to understand, right? We have tissue disruption. We have some type of a degrading process that occurs. It can help support the body in helping to make that less of a challenge, would be the best way, I guess, to describe it. Lipid support, helping the body in its proper metabolism. These are all areas that this pathway becomes supportive to the body in its normal processes. This is what I love about the essential oils, is that the essential oils have interaction that allows them to be supportive to the body through all of those different processes. Now, if we distilled all of that down to just a couple of things, because I don't have time today to go into all of the details of why I think this oil is beneficial. One of them is, for me, obviously, is going to be cardiovascular health. Now, we've talked for a long period of time in dōTERRA about having products that are more specifically focused on cardiovascular health. You will see that. You will see that coming. However, this is a really good first step into that, and one of the reasons why I'm excited about this combination of yarrow and pomegranate seed oil together. It's supportive of normal blood pressure regulation within the body. It helps to maintain these normalized cholesterol levels. When the body's able to achieve that, it's important that we can maintain that, and it supports the body in its ability to do that. And then health of the heart tissue itself. All tissues within the body need antioxidant protection. They need resiliency. And this is a product that can help them achieve that more fully. Now I want to talk about one more thing, metabolic dysfunction, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. But when we look at specifically adipose tissue within the body, there's chemical changes that occur within that. A lot of people think that I become overweight because I simply have more fat cells than anyone else. That's not necessarily the case. It's because they change. And as they change, their morphology changes. The chemistry that they produce changes. And when we look at this, we really get concerned with three primary things. When we have normalcy, size, reflected within those individual cells, the adipocytes, those fat cells themselves, we have a normalized balance of hormones that exist. Adiponectin is very high. On the other hand, resistin and something called tumor necrosis factor alpha is still produced within the cell, but they're in balance one with another. They're not dysregulated that way. One of the chemical changes that we see, and one of the reasons why Yarrow Pom, I believe, is so helpful, is because it can help the body maintain a more normalized approach and balance within this chemistry. It works with the body's own natural processes to do that. We see this inverse relationship of adiponectin versus resistin and consequently tumor necrosis factor alpha. Now, tumor necrosis factor alpha is really responsible for a lot of the tissue damage we talk about when we look at these types of things. Resistin itself actually is an agonist to cell receptibility of insulin. And so you've heard of things where people have greater resistance and they lose the efficiency that they need. And then we have adiponectin, which actually helps facilitate the body to be able to utilize those processes effectively. I like Yarrow and Pom because it helps to normalize more of those processes. And it makes it much easier for the body to overcome some of those challenges and as you support your way through that. So look for more, look for more information. You're going to have a wonderful opportunity to hear tomorrow from Nicole Stevens. Don't you love Nicole? Nicole is one of the many scientists that I have the privilege of working with. And Nicole's been doing some exciting research that I know that she's anxious to share with you. Now, here's an easy and simple way to use this product. This, of course, is not the only way that you can use it. I've been using this product, and I use it the way that I'm suggesting here firstly, and that is that I'm using it internally. Now, sometimes when we look at the chemistry of an essential oil, and if you go and you start reading all about Yarrow, you're going to read that, oh my goodness, you can't take that one internally. What is Dr. Hill talking about? Sometimes it's as important to know what's not in the oil as it is to know what is in the oil. And what's absent from this essential oil is chemistry that's known as thujone. Thujone is a neurotoxin, and there is no thujone in our Yarrow. However, there are lots of Yarrows in the marketplace that do have thujone. So when I talk about our products and I make recommendations, I want you to know that I'm being very specific to our product and what we know about our product. And although there may be some who criticize my approach to that, I have great confidence that we're representing and doing the correct things with our products. And so have that same confidence, will you? And of course, use it topically in very much the same ways we talked about before. Now in 2011, are you ready for some oral care? See, I told you I get all the exciting pieces. So in 2011, you'll remember that we launched the On Guard toothpaste. How many of you love On Guard toothpaste? Yeah, this was an all-natural formula. We actually added some no abrasive, harmful chemicals. It's full of CPTG essential oils, On Guard, which we all love. And then we added calcium hydroxyapatite, which really helps the enamel of the teeth to be strong and to be fortified. And this has become somewhat of a mainstay for us. This was one of the first products we went to after we launched On Guard as an essential oil. And so the time has come now for us to think about using some other things. Now, we looked at the On Guard toothpaste by itself and we did a study. We just did this back in March. We did a little bit of a trial, and what we found is that people who used the On Guard toothpaste, their teeth became 34% whiter, and plaque formation itself was reduced rather significantly at 63% just from using the On Guard toothpaste. Can I say something about this really quick? Historically, if we look at clinical trials, do you know that to date there's only been right about 300 clinical trials that have ever been done with the essential oils? Human clinical trials. Were you aware of that? In the last year, dōTERRA did 4 of them alone. Just dōTERRA by itself. We're moving into an era where we're going to do more and more and more of that through our healthcare initiative. And you're going to hear more about that this afternoon. So now it's time for us to talk about On Guard mouthwash. Now I have to tell you a little bit of a story about the On Guard mouthwash. Now for us, it wasn't just about taking On Guard and putting it in a formula and giving you a mouthwash. That's not what we were looking for. We were looking to do something very different. There were some qualities in this that were very important to us. First, we wanted to make sure that it was based around On Guard. We wanted you to have the benefit of On Guard. The other thing in the formula is we didn't want you to have alcohol. Even when you look at formulas that are claimed to be natural, they contain a lot of alcohol as the active ingredient. We didn't want any alcohol in this. And then the last thing that I'm really proud of, I've got to give some kudos out to the scientists that I get to work with. One of the greatest privileges I have in dōTERRA, among my many responsibilities, is I get to administer over and work with our product development team. We spend huge amounts of time looking at all the chemistry and what are the outcomes that we're looking for. And this was no small thing to create a mouthwash in that environment that also is 100% clear. Now you've probably seen others that have oils and you have to shake them up because the oil separates, and so you have to mix it back into solution before you use it. This stays suspended in solution the entire time. We were able to do that through a proprietary microencapsulation process. And what was significant about that and what was so difficult, it's not that we can't microencapsulate things. It's that when you do, you most often damage the essential oils. The heat that you have to use, the process that you have to go through, you can damage the essential oils, especially the more delicate compounds that we see, the most highly volatile compounds that we see. And so we developed a process that would allow us to do that without creating any damage whatsoever. Are you excited about this product? Now, I knew you'd be excited, and I'm happy that you are, but I thought it would be a good idea if we did maybe just a little bit of research to show you how the product is working. So we did a clinical study, and one of the things that we looked at first was the pH. Now, pH, the pH of your mouth itself, is a direct correlator to the oral health that you can expect. So whether it's halitosis or it's other types of unwanted improper oral health effects, we were able to show and demonstrate that we can help to balance the pH within the mouth. Now, when we look at the pH, we need it to be within 6.5 to 7.4. Isn't this riveting? This is fantastic. I was out on a date with my wife the other night, and we had just come back from the conjugated linolenic acid growths. And she said, I sense that the pH in your mouth is not quite what it should be. This will help to balance that pH. 70% of the participants, after using this for just 4 days, were able to balance the pH back to within normal, healthy range. Now, think about not the short-term effects of just 4 days, but think about this more in long-term effects. Now, knowing that that might not be enough, we went ahead and did a formalized study through one of our research partners. They were kind enough to do this for us. And we looked at an enzyme called MMP8. And MMP8 is a degradation enzyme that we see when we have improper oral health, when things are not on the track for what we want them to be. Now, this is a little misleading when you look at this. First off, we had to test this in different concentrations. And the reason why we do that is we like to see where the effectiveness comes in. So we first tested this at a concentration of 20%. Now, to help you, what that means is we took the On Guard formula and we reduced it down so that it was only at 20% strength. And what you see is that at 20% strength, it still had an inhibition rate of more than 40% of this particular enzyme. That's remarkable at 20% strength. And so then we bumped it all the way up to 80% strength. We did a solution that is constituted to reflect 80% of the strength that you have in the mouthwash itself. And it was effective at almost 80%. Now, the comparison to this, you're going to say, what happened when we used it at 100% strength? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is there's limitations in the testing that we can do. When you do this type of testing, there's only so much space that you can utilize through the testing process. So by the time we add the concentration, we have the enzymes that we're looking at, and everything else that has to go into it, we just had a maximum capacity that we could test of only 80%. Now, I will tell you my own personal belief. My own personal belief is that full strength, that 80% will increase remarkably. What we used as a standard, what we used as a comparison, was something called acetone. If you don't know what acetone is, it's a really bad chemical. Kills everything. It's a toxin. You would never want to use it. But isn't it interesting that here on guard is, excuse me, here on guard is as an all-natural formula without any of that toxicity performing in the same way. I think that's remarkable, don't you? Be excited about the new On Guard mouthwash. We worked very, very hard on that. It's really simple and easy to understand how to use. You can use it in between brushing anytime that you want. But it's also good to be sure that you use the toothpaste and the On Guard mouthwash in combination with one another. You want to talk a little bit about citrus oils? We talk a lot about citrus oils in dōTERRA. It seems to me like, by my recollection, here in the United States, we have 6 different varieties of citrus oils. Is that not true? I remember as we first launched dōTERRA, I thought to myself, as we got lemon, and then grapefruit, and then wild orange, that's all the citrus oils that we need. I think I was wrong, because since that time, we've added lemon, and we've added lime, and we've added tangerine, and we've added bergamot. And so we have a whole supply of citrus oils for you. Now, one of the things that I love about citrus oils is that you can have individual aromatic preference for the citrus oils. And the reason why that becomes valuable is because they have shared benefits. A lot of the chemistry that we see is similar, even though there is some subtle differences. And all of the citrus oils have limonene associated with it. Every single one of them have limonene. So choose your favorite and you can't go wrong. And so then it begs the question, how do we divide up the category of citrus oils? How do we make sense of this? Because you should be having a hint by now that I am going to launch a new citrus oil. And so let's divide it into 2 simple categories. Those that have dominant chemistry for limonene. And you already know this. Those of you who are new with this, you might be learning this for the first time. But tangerine, grapefruit, and wild orange all have 95% or more of pure D-limonene. Now, I'm not going to go into all the health benefits associated with that, although they are remarkable. But this is the primary reason why you hear us talk and speak all the time, because of how they help the body to preserve and protect cellular structure and function. These are oils that we generally consider that we should try to use every day. Now, me personally, I like adding them to my water. But if you come to our home, we diffuse them in our home all the time. This is a mainstay. If you're ever at dōTERRA and you come by my office, if you can get through the myriad of locked doors and sentinels that seem to stand everywhere now, I'll tell you how to sneak past them. Are you ready? Wait till they leave, and under the desk, there's a button you push, and it opens all the doors magically. And you just come right back. You're going to find that I diffuse citrus oils in my office every single day, almost without exception. I love the benefits that it brings to me. I believe the context that it's helping my body to become more resilient, becoming more fortified. And so use these oils in that capacity. Now, limonene, which is the one that we always talk about, does a whole lot more. And while I won't spend any time going through these benefits, understand it's not singular to cell protection. No chemistry in the body, no chemistry, therefore, in the essential oils is just singular. When I say chemistry in the body, I'm referring to the oils themselves. It's going to have a myriad of benefits, and we see that with the essential oils. So you might, in your mind, have a very specific reason to use them. But think that it goes far beyond, even if you don't understand all of the reasons why. So let me introduce to you Green Mandarin. Now, I love Green Mandarin. I've got to tell you a little bit of a story with Green Mandarin. Now, Emily and I had a chance to go to Brazil not too long ago where we were looking at copaiba. And it was everything you'd imagine it would be. We were in little dugout canoes, and we went up the Amazon. We traipsed through the jungle. We found spiders that were big enough to carry you away. Emily was petrified of snakes. I walked around, and there were these big burrows everywhere that I saw as we were walking and hiking. And I kept asking, what are those burrows? And I'm not exaggerating. They were probably about that big around. And they always just ignored me and said, oh, nothing, oh, nothing. And as we were walking, finally up above us in the tree, there was a spider that was about that big around. And they started laughing, and they pointed at it, and they, of course, got it down, and they disposed of it. And then they said, you shouldn't be looking at the burrows. That's where they go at night. In the daytime, they're in the trees above you. And so they've been laughing at us all day because we've been seeing all of these. Well, the exact opposite of that part of Brazil is down in southern Brazil, which is where we source our Green Mandarin from. It's beautiful. It reminds me of being in Italy where we source a lot of our other citrus oils from. It's a beautiful part of Brazil, and it's an intensive process. Now, what's interesting about Green Mandarin is red mandarin. It's just unripened. And the process that they have to go through to obtain this is that the trees themselves have to be thinned. You can't just let them all grow. And so they take about 60 to 70% of the fruit they eliminate before it's ripe. In the past, that has just been a throwaway. But at dōTERRA, we wondered, is there some value in that essential oil? And what we discovered is that it has three amazing qualities. First off, it does have some unusual chemistry. And because of that chemistry, it has a non-typical aroma. It does have a citrus aroma to it, but it has more of an earthy scent as well. And so I like it because it gives us some variety within the citrus oils. And then reduced or no photosensitivity. Now on the label, you're still going to see this warning that says maybe photosensitive. Pay attention to that, but we cannot detect any furocoumarins at all in this essential oil, which is partly why I got excited about it. And I have to believe it's because the unripened fruit, they just have not developed to that extent yet. And so we don't have furocoumarins. We don't see that in this essential oil. Now I'm going to talk with you a little bit about limonene. It has a substantial amount of that, but it also has something called gamma-terpene. And gamma-terpene has its own health benefits associated with it. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time with that, but rather tell you how those two work together to help the body to be able to respond appropriately. Now, I've talked about this a few years ago. I talked about brain pathway, and I went through a number of different things. And I'm talking now about how limonene and gamma-terpene, like what we see associated with this case with the mandarin essential oil, have a direct effect within the spinal cord, and it's really easy to understand. We have some type of an outside stimulus that stimulates the release of acetylcholine within the spinal cord that acts as a signaling messenger that increases peripheral dis-ease and discomfort. So you see, it's really easy to understand. And one of the things that happens then with this is that it actually helps the body to control its release of acetylcholine. And so in the periphery, we don't feel the same level of discomfort that we did once before. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying, or do I just need to be completely non-compliant? By the way, we don't want to be non-compliant. We should be proud of where we are as a company, that we can talk about our oils, that we're sophisticated enough to move beyond the things that other people still, in complacency, do. I'm grateful to have had that challenge in dōTERRA, and that it's caused us to have new discovery and new exploration of the essential oils, and to learn how to use and talk about them differently. And here's a good example. This is similar to the pathway that we talked about earlier, which is the COX-2 pathway. This is the LOX-5 pathway, or the 5 LOX pathway. And this deals with the same tissue disruption, but is focused primarily within the respiratory system. And so you've heard before that citrus oils can be really clarifying to the respiratory system. Here's another good example of how that happens. Here's an easy, simple way to use this oil. Use it like you do any of the other citrus oils, but then don't be afraid to apply it in some of these other methods as well. And I won't take time to go into those because they're pretty self-explanatory. You ready for another oil? Okay, me too. Let's talk about turmeric. Yes. So the other day, my wife and I were in India and Nepal, and we were walking through the turmeric fields. Now this comes from a root. This comes from a root. Now I'm going to take just a little bit of time here, and I'm going to explain to you some of the differences that exist between turmeric essential oil and the botanical of turmeric, because there's a lot of confusion that's there. Now let me first tell you that turmeric, again, is not something new. Several years ago, we talked about turmeric. We didn't feel like the timing was right, and we also didn't have sourcing that was developed that we were confident in. In the very beginning of dōTERRA, we had some limitation in what we could do because of our commitment to CPTG. It's nice to be in a time where we can have enough foresight that we can plan to the future, that we can look ahead, whether it's something like Roman chamomile or Melissa or rose or any number of other essential oils that we talk about routinely, that we can do a 3 or 4 or 5 year project and bring those to fruition in the context that you and I expect in dōTERRA. And turmeric fits into that perfectly. It's the same exact thing for us. Now, one of the interesting things about turmeric is if we look at the constitution of it, it really is broken down into 3 components that I want to talk about. One, the bulk of now I'm talking about the botanical itself. The bulk of the botanical is made up of water and proteins and carbohydrates, fats and minerals and fiber. This is the main reason, aside from the water, that you'll hear a lot of people say it's fat soluble. It's fat soluble, so if you take turmeric, if you're using a turmeric powder, or if you do the supplement, just take it with some other fatty type of a substance. So a fatty oil, for example, will help it to digest appropriately. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the chemistry that we're after within the botanical fits into these 2 other categories. One is curcuminoids. Now, if you know anything about nutrition, if you keep up on any of those things, you know that curcuminoids have created a lot of excitement lately, and it's because of the broad spectrum of activity that they represent. And then the other is tumerones. So let's talk about both of those just real quickly, curcuminoids and tumerones, because when we look at the other constitution of what we see within the root as a whole, within that botanical substance, water and proteins, carbohydrates, minerals, fats, we get those from a lot of other things. And so our interest has been narrowed. So the curcuminoids themselves, this is what you see when you take an encapsulation. This is what you see when you're taking a supplement of turmeric. Here's the problem. First off, these are large, water-soluble molecules. And because of that, you get very poor absorption, and you get reduced biological activity. Now, there's a reason why we say that. The poor absorption also means rapid metabolism, and it also means rapid elimination. So we just don't get the usability out of the product that we're looking for. We don't get the full value. Now, a lot of people say, well, maybe if we combine this with other substances like piperine from black pepper, that would help to change the constitution to make it more soluble. That would, but that also comes with its own challenges associated with that. One of the things that I like about dōTERRA, this is not new to us. You just don't know that it's not new. Do you know that you've been getting curcuminoids for almost as long as you can remember in dōTERRA? We have curcuminoids in both the alpha CRS, and we have a substantial amount of curcuminoids in the deep blue polyphenol context. And not only that, we've gone through a proprietary process where we've combined them with essential oils, so we get absorption 7 times increased. So you get the full value. So just use what we're already using for you to take full advantage of the curcuminoids that now everybody is talking about. And so then that leaves us with the tumerones, right? So let's talk about the tumerones real quickly. Now, tumerones actually come from the essential oil. And the amount of tumerones that we have within the botanical itself is somewhat small. And so one of the things that happens is most often people will do a CO2 extract. Now you can do a CO2 extract, or you can do a standard distillation and have an essential oil. Now in my research and my excitement for this, as I really started looking some time ago what was in the marketplace, this was an actual label that I found. USDA certified turmeric CO2 essential oil. Now it's splitting hairs, but things like this bother me. A CO2 extract is not an essential oil. And let me tell you why it's not. Now CO2 extracts, I'm not saying they're not valuable, but let me give you some insight as to why we didn't do it in this case. CO2 extracts, there's supercritical extracts, which is high temperature and high pressure. There's subcritical CO2, which is low temperature and low pressure. And then there's even mid-range CO2, which is somewhere in the middle between them. The advantage of CO2 as an extract, if there is one, is that typically the CO2 itself, which is what extracts the essential oil components, is perceived to be really valuable because we don't have any solvents left over that we sometimes see with other processes. But here's the problem. CO2 is selective. And not only do we get other things besides the essential oils, we don't get all of the volatile chemistry from the essential oil. So we have a partial chemistry profile. And so for us, that just really wasn't an option. And the primary reason why is because when the chemistry is inconsistent, the ratio of the chemistry. Do you remember 3 years ago, we introduced to you arc plotting? Do you remember that? Where we talked about how chemistry has to be in balance, and it's one of our telltales for quality of essential oils. We don't talk about that anymore. We just shared with you that that's something we do. We continue to do that. We continue to build that library. We continue to use that resource because we're interested in the ratios of the chemistry as a marker, not just of quality, but also as a marker of bioactivity within the body. These are important things that get constituted within the essential oils that are lost and forgotten about by most individuals, but we pay close attention to. Inconsistent chemistry in its ratios, there's inconsistency in the benefit. And we had no desire for that, so we did something very simple. We chose to distill this as an essential oil. And here's the comparison. In the CO2 extract, why another reason everyone likes to do is I get all these curcuminoids. But remember, it's water soluble. I can't digest it without some assistance. And then I get very little of the tumerones. And because I don't get a very high yield, a lot of times other things are added into it, and I still get solvents and other unwanted things. Now this is specific to turmeric. With the essential oil, how we're producing it, we get nothing but all of the volatile aromatic compounds. And the compounds that we're looking for is tumerones. There's alpha tumerone, there's beta tumerone, there's something called AR tumerone. And that deals with the aromatic preference of the tumerone. It's called aromatic tumerone, so therefore AR tumerone. We have high amounts of each of those and substantial amounts of AR tumerone. And why that's an advantage to us is that it makes the turmeric essential oil bioavailable. It can easily cross through and cross over the membranes and the different planes that it must do to be active within the body. Now, here's some of the key benefits that we see associated with that. Natural tissue support, increased antioxidant activity, sustains cardiovascular health, preserves neurological tissue, preserves brain function. It supports even all of those areas and in all of those capacities. Now, we did a study at dōTERRA, and we did a neurological study. Now, we're in the very beginnings of this study. We're going to do much more work, but I want to show you what we have found in our initial results. We wanted to know, would turmeric essential oil create for us the advantage of protecting some of those most delicate cells that we see within the central nervous system, dendritic cells located within the brain specifically. And what we found, this picture will make no sense to you, but it's a colorful picture, right? It's a colorful picture, and what it's really demonstrating is increased activity within those dendritic cells. And we saw that in two frameworks. One is that healthy neurons, otherwise healthy neurons that became stressed or damaged, showed improvement, significant improvement, recovery, and activity in the presence of turmeric, and turmeric essential oil. The other thing that we did was we looked at healthy cells, and they became not only increased in their activity, but they also became more resilient and less susceptible to damage. And so in my estimation, turmeric is a wonderful essential oil for you to begin to learn and to use. Now, I've got some application methods here for you. You can use it topically. I have to tell you, turmeric, to me, is not my favorite aroma. However, take advantage and combine it with some of the oils that we've talked about. For example, mandarin and turmeric together, and especially because they're parallel pathway through the 5 LOX pathway, is a beautiful aroma, and it gives you enhanced benefits. So look for some ways that you can couple that essential oils. One of my favorite ways to begin using that, of course, is internally. Not all of us need to take oils internally. That's not something that every one of us needs to do. For me, I do it within moderation for what works best for me. And I do it in the context of it's the most convenient and effective for me. And so choose whichever method is best for you, whether you want to diffuse or use topically or use it internally. You're not limiting the benefits. We might be changing some of the course or some of the length associated with that. We might have to change and adjust dosage associated with that, and our usage specifically. But there's no reason why you can't have benefits no matter how you choose to use the essential oils. Now, I bring this up because we've talked a lot about copaiba. We talked a lot about it last year. Emily spent some time and she talked with you about beta-carotene today, and she reflected some of what you learned last year at convention right here. One of the things I want you to know is that it's not just beta-carotene. It has targets outside of the endocannabinoid system as well. And here's just a few of them. The cardiovascular system, supporting healthy liver and brain tissue and activity and function. Lots of reasons. Remember, we get really excited about beta-carotene, and we get excited about copaiba or yarrow or any number of essential oils that has it. But remember, there's other chemistry that's present as well. And collectively, we have a much broader spectrum of activity that's just limited to the few things that we highlight. So when you have an oil that you appreciate, when you have an oil that you love, use that oil. I can tell you in making your choices, you won't be wrong in choosing what feels right and what feels best to you. And know that there's a variety of chemistry. Now, that having been said, I love copaiba. And so we thought it'd be really nice if we gave you copaiba soft gels. Now, I know what you're thinking. And so we're going to have the discussion one more time. What is carrageenan? Now, I know that over the years, I've talked with you about a variety of different things, and I said, listen, there's different types of carrageenan, right? They're not all exactly the same. Polygeenan is not the same as carrageenan, right? And there's different types that we can utilize. Some really are in the context of not being very helpful to you. Some are not damaging at all. Guess which one we chose? The one that's not damaging. But none of you are believing me, so I came up with a great analogy. How many of you like ice cream? Don't be dishonest. Raise your hands up high. I know you do. Do you know in one bowl of ice cream you get more carrageenan than you're going to get in a lifetime of taking our products? Did you know that? Not too long ago, I came home and somebody had called my wife, which I was not appreciative of. And they said, we would like to know why your husband thinks carrageenan is okay. Don't you know how bad it is? And so when I came home that night, my wife was waiting for me. There'll be no walking through the CLA groves tonight. That's not going to happen. And she wanted to ask me about carrageenan. Why would we be irresponsible? Because she herself had read a lot of information. What was ironic about it, she was saying all this to me while she was eating her seaweed, which is where that comes from. So I thought that was somewhat amusing. I'm tired of the fight. Carrageenan-free. Now, this is our first soft gel with no carrageenan. And we're going to be converting all of our soft gels to no carrageenan, and it will just go away. It's not that we haven't believed you, and it's not that we haven't listened to you. It's that many times we have to develop new technology, and we have some wonderful partners who have helped us to do that. It's been a long 3-year period of time, but here we are, and now we're going to go to carrageenan-free soft gels. In closing, let me just share one final thought with you. I came across this the other day. Somebody actually placed it on my desk. And I thought it had meaning for us today. And it's just something I'd like to share with you in closing. It says, it's not possible to know what's impossible. Ideas are of no value if we don't make them true. Everything begins with a conversation. And the world belongs to the curious. Creativity makes the world spin. If you don't change the world, someone else will. The best way to predict the future is to create it. My friends, let's create our wonderful future together. I love you all. It's a pleasure being with you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You are the future. I say you are